think we could probably get started. Thank you for coming. It's kind of an unusual spring day, but it's a good day to learn how to prune. So I just want to start by saying that people are usually very intimidated by roses. They feel like a plant that's so special that you might not be able to do it right. But I want to assure you that roses are one of the most forgiving, easy plants to learn how to prune on. Do you guys care if I take this off?
No.
Okay. Sorry.
No.
Roses are super forgiving. So if you feel like you've made a mistake, next year will be completely different. It's different than a fruit tree where if you make a cut improperly on a fruit tree, you may wreck the tree for the rest of its life, and you'd be correcting it forever. Roses are not that way. There's a lot of different kinds of roses, hybrids, floribundas, grandifloras, climbers, miniatures, ramblers. They all have the same basic principles for pruning. So some you would prune less on. Like a miniature, you would not prune as much as on a climber or a rambler. But the principles are all the same. So you'll be able to take it home and make it work for your roses. I want to talk a little bit about what you're going to need for equipment before we talk about pruning, because you don't want to have to be uncomfortable while you're pruning. And gloves is the #1 thing. You just want a good pair of gloves. Leather usually works really well. Although I have pruned in latex gloves before, you just have to be more careful, and they rip more quickly. These are my favorite rose pruning gloves. They're really comfortable, and they come up on your arm so you're not hurting your arm and poking yourself there. I've had mine for probably 5 or 6 years, so they're also really durable. So that's cool. And then Debbie, who has worked here for, oh my goodness, 27 plus years, prunes in these for roses. And she said they work really well. I personally have never tried it.
Heavy for roses or something?
They're just really sturdy for roses. But then you can also use them, they're also chemical resistant. So you can use them, if you're spraying roses, you could use them thin as well. So it would be like a dual purpose. I might be hesitant to spray a chemical in my nice leather gloves, just because I don't want to wash them. So this would be an option. And you're welcome to try them when, yeah.
I have a question about leather gloves. I have a couple of pairs that I love. How can you, if they get really dirty sometimes, how do you clean them without it getting stiff?
So you can use some of the cleaners like for shoes, like leather shoe cleaner. You can use those. You can also wash them, but then you have to condition them afterwards. So, which is kind of a hassle. One way to do it is just to let the dirt dry and then flake it off with a soft brush. That actually is pretty effective. Okay. So that can work. Then the next tool that's most critical would be a hand pruner. These are Felcos. This is what I call a lifetime pruner. Every part on a Felco is replaceable. You can get a new blade, you can get new screws, everything is replaceable. So they're the most expensive pruner, but they are a lifetime pruner if you don't lose them. And then I think the next best pruner that I've tried, which I had not used before till I started pruning roses here at the nursery, is this ARS pruner. It's a smaller pruner, so it fits in your hand really well. And when we're potting up roses, we're pruning roots and the tops of the roses, and so I just need something a little smaller that moves quickly. And the ARS seems to hold up. About half the price of the Felco. And then there's also Dram. They work really well. They're smaller as well. The thing I like about Dram is they come in bright colors, so you can see it when you set it down. So that's super helpful. Then again, half the cost. Nothing on these two pruners are replaceable though. Once it kind of breaks, you are kind of stuck buying new pruners. So another tool that comes in really handy for roses is the deadheader tool. It snips the, I can't get into it. It's just a small tool that when you're out in the garden and your roses are spent, you can just snip the head of the rose off. That encourages it to keep blooming. So, but you can also use scissors and you can also use pruners. The next pruner size that you'll go to if your roses are really overgrown or it's a vigorous rose will be the lopper. These are kind of small to 3/4 inch size on the stem. These are 3/4 and above to about 2 inches. These kind of pruners. Both good pruners. Felco also makes that also replaceable parts. And then the next tool for really overgrown roses is the pruning saw. It's a really helpful, useful tool. It opens just with the flip, and then very storable. And then it goes in your pocket so you don't lose it. So this is sort of the last resort to pruning roses. Probably not going to use it a lot, but you will get some really vigorous climbers or ramblers that might need it at the base. So then the other thing that I've learned over the course of pruning many roses, I have 26 myself, which is nothing compared to some people I know, but is I always have good intentions of getting rid of the waste. But if I don't pull my waste basket to where I'm pruning, it's going to sit on the ground. It's going to wreck the grass. I'm going to lose one of the little pieces, and then I'm going to step on it or grab it later, and it's going to hurt. So I always drag the waste basket around with me as well. It just makes the whole process faster. So then I want to get into why you would prune. Not everything needs to be pruned, but roses really, really need to be pruned every single year. They're much healthier when you prune them every year. It lets the sunlight in, they produce better flowers. It lets air in so that you control diseases. Many diseases are caused because of the plant being overcrowded. So you want good air circulation, and pruning helps that. The other thing that pruning does for roses is it creates new wood. And roses bloom on new wood, except with very few exceptions. Moss roses bloom on last year's wood, but almost all the other roses will bloom on this year's wood, so it needs to be new. Then the other reason why you would prune is to train the rose to do what you want it to do, to keep it in its space. You don't want to take a rose that's going to be 6 feet and prune it down to the ground every single year and expect it to stay 4 feet, because you're kind of pushing the plant to do something it doesn't really want to do. But you can keep them in bounds enough to make them look pretty in your yard, and to have all those things like good airflow and the sunshine and that kind of thing. It also helps with bugs. They don't have the same opportunity. Aphids especially are opportunistic that way. If your plant is overcrowded, you're going to get aphids. And then if the plant is not crowded, the ladybugs know where to go to get the aphids. So it's kind of a win-win situation that way. And then one of the reasons I love to prune is because it helps my mental health. I'm out in a season where it's kind of not warm, it's kind of wet, but I'm getting out and it gets me invigorated to get ready for the season. for other things as well as just my roses. And if I'm really frustrated, somehow chopping something down really helps. So, and not to worry. The thing I love about roses is, you could chop a rose to the ground, and it is going to throw a new shoot, and make a new flower for you. So they are super forgiving that way, which is great. There's a couple different times to prune for roses. Lots of people talk about pruning in the fall, and fall is not a bad time to prune, but you don't want to prune a lot. You want to prune so that the plant's not going to get wind damage or ice damage. If especially on ramblers, they kind of arch sometimes, and they'll whip in the wind, and they will cross each other and damage other branches. So in the fall, you're kind of pruning so that those things don't happen. So you're going to want to take a plant down maybe a third to half in its size. You don't want to take it down to the ground, because if we do get a bad winter, you won't have anything left to prune if it gets frost damage or if a branch breaks or something like that. So you want to only prune about a third to half in the fall. And you would do that towards the end of October or November here in Oregon. Roses, I've had roses blooming in December. Not all of them, but occasionally, I mean, there are a few roses that will keep going. Most of them will kind of slow down though, and you'd have the opportunity to prune. So I missed pruning a rose that was on a metal trellis this past winter, and it got, this tall, and it rubbed against the trellis, and so it damaged quite a bit of the canes, and I ended up having to prune a couple weeks ago, probably 2/3 of the plant away because of the damage. So fall pruning can be beneficial, but it's not necessary. If you don't prune in the fall, your roses will still grow well, because there's spring pruning. Spring pruning actually starts about now. They say like President's Day, mid-February is a good time, and then probably through March is optimal. That being said, if you move into a new house and you have rose bushes that are overgrown and you just need to refresh them, they'll take summer pruning as well. I wouldn't do it in like the days that we had last summer where it was 114 degrees, but they'll take some summer pruning. Roses are really good about that.
I've noticed some of my roses are putting out new leaves now, and I'm very hesitant to prune those off.
So you don't want to prune off all the new leaves. I brought this in as an example. I have a rambling rose that stayed in leaf all winter, and it's pushing its new growth. You can kind of see it a little bit, and that's okay, because I'm just gonna come in and I'm gonna whack it back and throw it away. So you don't really want to prune this part, this little bud. You don't necessarily want to prune that. You're pruning on the cane. So, but you are going to get rid of some of your new growth, because roses are already pushing their new growth right now. We've had some nice sunny days. The sun is staying out longer at night, so they are going to start to grow. It's also going to be 18 degrees this week, and you may get some damage, so you might want to wait and not prune this week, so that if you do get damage, you can tell on the stem where your damage is, and you can cut that and not have to come back a second time and take off damage that was created this week. So hopefully we don't get that, but I don't know. So more about the particulars of pruning. There are basically 4 Ds that you're going to prune for. Dead wood, Deadwood usually looks black or brown. It's not going to have these little buds right now. Stems are usually really vibrantly green. Some roses have different color, green, but they're all should be green right now. So you'll want to prune those back. Also, damaged wood. Branches a lot of times will cross, they'll rub up against each other, they'll create these little abrasions on the stem. And you can prune that out as well. You want to prune for diseased wood. I don't know, I can pass this around, but this lovely plant that was in flower or leaf also has a black spot on it. So I don't know if you guys can see that. That's what black spot looks like. And it's a fungal disease that's created by wet, really wet weather. And if you had a lot of it, or a little bit, you could just come in and prune that leaf off and be done with it instead of spraying. Sometimes I'll do that. I'll be walking in the garden, I'll see something that looks diseased, and I'll just pick a few leaves off to get rid of that, because then you're getting rid of the spores.
Is it true that you don't want to let the leaves drop on the ground below the plant and get rid of them?
You do want to clean it up. That helps. It's just a cultural improvement to the plant to clean all that up, because those spores, when they fall to the ground and then it rains, will splash back onto the plant, and it will lodge itself in the little leaflet nodes and then cause damage later. It can cause damage 5 or 6 months later. So you do kind of want to keep things as clean as you can. But you don't have to be like really obsessive, but just as clean as you can keep them. Powdery mildew is also a disease that happens. That is a disease that happens when it's the weather warms up, but then the nights get cold, and the humidity level is up a little high. And it looks fuzzy. It looks like somebody dusted your plant with a light coating of flour or powdered sugar, and it stops the leaves from photosynthesizing. So opening the plant up with air circulation really stops that disease from happening. It helps the wind to blow through and kind of dry the leaves and prevent that powdery mildew. Another disease that we don't get a super lot of here, but that you would definitely want to get rid of and prune out right away, is rust. And rust is on the plant, and it's orange, and it almost looks pustule, and it's really can devastate your plant quickly. It can kill a rose pretty quickly, so you'll want to get rid of that. It comes from plants that bring it in, so like hawthorn plants and some ash and cedar are hosts for rust, the disease, and so it will transmit to other plants. It will transmit to roses, pears, and some apples. So if you have wild hawthorn, like if you live by a creek bank and you have wild hawthorn, just be aware that you could be getting rust on your roses as well. So those diseases are all kept at bay by pruning to some degree. And then the last form of pruning that is super beneficial that you'll do all through the summer is to deadhead your roses. Deadheading keeps them reflowering. So, and when you deadhead, you can just take that hip off, just cut the top off. If you want to invigorate the rose to grow another flower, though, you'll want to cut back to a 5-leafed little leaflet on your rose. And there's a flyer about that. You can kind of see what the leaf looks like a little bit better. Some roses have only a leaflet with 3 leaves. That's not enough flower. If you cut back to that, you're just going to get nothing. But so you want to cut back to this so that more flower stems are produced and that you get beautiful flowers. That's the whole reason for growing roses is the beautiful flowers. Because I only know of one thornless rose, and it's super beautiful, but it's not smelly, and it's ginormous.
It's what?
It's ginormous.
Oh.
It's a climber, and it gets really big. It's called the Lady Banks rose. It's yellow, and it has a small yellow flower on it. It's really pretty. It's thornless, but it's not smelly. And I mostly grow roses for the smell, so. The other thing when you're pruning is you don't want to leave a stub on a rose. So you can kind of see where I cut this. It's at an angle. There's research that shows that is not as important as it used to be. They used to tell you 45 away from the bud, and that was how you had to do it. Research is now showing that is not as important as just pruning. Pruning is the most important part. So this is about right for how far you would want to come down on the stub. What you wouldn't want to do is cut this rose way up there. This will die. It's just inevitable. This always dies back. So you want to come closer to the rose. So, like right there. And that will stop that dieback in the stem. Yeah, I'm cutting closer to the leaf bud axil. Yeah, so I don't want to cut that bud, but just right above it. So as you're, it's probably like maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch in that space. And in all honesty, roses can be crowded sometimes. You might not be able to get that close. I'm going to show you some roses in a minute that are pretty close together, and I'm going to leave a stub occasionally just because I'm not going to be able to get that close. So, let's see. Oh, okay. So, also, there's a couple different kinds of cuts. This is the end of my plant, and heading cut, I'm going to make a heading cut. So I'm going to cut back here on this, and that's called a heading cut. That will force new growth out along the stem, and it will force the growth the direction that the bud is pointed. So there's a couple different buds on this. This one's going that way, and also this one is going that way. This one is going that way though. So whatever direction the bud is pointing is the direction your new stem is going to come out. And then there's also thinning cuts where you just go down to the bottom of the base of the plant at the bud union, and you're just going to cut something off, the whole stem, and just get rid of it. So 2 different kinds of cuts. Mostly you'll make heading cuts as you're pruning, but you will make a few thinning cuts to open the plant up a little bit. And then there will also be suckers. So I'm gonna, let me see. All right, I'm gonna show you the worst possible rose ever. So at the nursery, when we get our bare root roses in, we prune the roots. And it looks scary, but I don't want to dig a hole for that big a root system. And I also want to stimulate the roots to grow. So we would prune them and plant them. Roses are heavily rooted plants. they really dig themselves down into the ground. So you want to give them a good start. This rose has many crossing, damaged plant parts. So I don't see any, well, so there is something dead here. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's not big, but sometimes that's what dead looks like. This I could just do with my fingers, but if it was a big branch, I would take it out with my pruners. But there's a lot of damage on this plant. So this whole branch right here is damaged. So I'm going to take it out all the way at the base of the tree, or at the base of the stem. So just making a flush cut there. It also has some leaves in it. More damage here.
Is that a bush rose or a pot?
This is a hybrid tea.
A hybrid tea.
Yeah, this is a hybrid tea. So this is the root system. This is the root stalk, and then this is the graft union on this plant. So this is a grafted rose.
So what does that mean?
So it's on a different rose stem. The roots are different. That's done for the vigor of the plant, some disease resistance, hardiness, because not all roses are hardy on their own root. I would say probably, I'm going to guess, I would say 70 to 75% of all the roses grown in the United States are grafted roses. And
So I bought a beautiful apricot rose, and it's a tall climber, and I pruned it, but I never pruned it all the way back down. But it now is just a plain, very non-interesting red rose.
Right.
So did I cut off a graft, and even though I didn't go all the way down, I mean, I never.
so you may not have done anything. Sometimes roses are this union is damaged and you lose the top part of your plant. Sometimes also the rootstock takes over, and then you see growth coming out at the bottom and you think, oh good, but it's the rootstock. So you have rootstock growing right now.
Right.
You could go down and cut it out and see if your grafted rose is still there, and see if that would help it. Because you will want to prune anything that comes out here from this area of the plant. Suckers usually grow thin and really fast and very tall. It'll be much different than the rest of the base of your plant. It'll just shoot up like overnight, and you'll know that that's a sucker. And in Oregon, it seems like the rootstocks here it's a sort of a purplish, dark purple colored rootstock, and that red. They're usually single petaled, they don't smell, but they're very prolific flowering wise. They can be kind of pretty if you want to keep it, you can, but in general I would cut them out. So, and then get what you want. So this rose has some damage here, and I would just go, and this is dead right here. So I would cut that out, and then there's some dead damaged stuff here. I would also, okay, so I got rid of everything that's damaged, and now I want to look at the rose and decide how open I want it. So I don't really like this spindly branch here. It's crossing into this thicker branch. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to thin it. So I'm going to get rid of it. I don't like this. So I'm going to thin that. I also don't like this. So I'm going to get rid of that and open it up. Same for this. I don't like this. Or this. So that gives me a little bit more openness in my plant. And then I also don't like this. So I'm going to get rid of that. And there's more damage down here. Sometimes opening up a plant gives you better vision to what you have there. So it's still a little crowded. So I'm going to take this out. And I'm also going to take that out because I don't like it. So those are all the thinning cuts. And this also is just damaged. So, and now I'm going to prune for height. In the spring you can prune more. Hard pruning will recover. Plants that are hard pruned will recover pretty quickly. This plant is already a pretty good size. But I'm going to cut so that it's a little bit smaller so you can see it.
But how do you know? Because you've got several roses and they can get really tall, and then there's the bush ones that are about not floribundant, but just regular.
Right, like the shrub roses.
The shrub roses that get like maybe 3-4 feet wide. How far is there a rule of thumb? Like, do you just take it down like in general, or you go way down?
So it really does depend on the rose. On a shrub rose, I probably wouldn't go down far. I would prune for the dead, the damaged, and the disease, and open it up a little bit. And then I would probably only go down 1/3. You know, like on my miniature rose, I don't prune down very far at all. I just really concentrate on those 4 things. And then on some hybrid teas that get, 5 or 6 feet tall, I would take it down. I would take it down low, hard prune, for sure. So all these buds are facing in a direction that they will grow. So, which is super helpful. So, like, I'm going to take this one's going to shoot that way. I want it to go out from the plant, not into the plant. As much as possible, try to prune to an outward bud. And sometimes the buds won't show themselves until a little bit later. Like this stalk right here doesn't have very much visual cue on it right yet, but I don't know if you guys can see it, but it will have this little spot right here, like a crease in the stem, and that's where it will push a bud. So you have to you just have to look at roses for a little bit, and you could start a rose pruning project and then not finish it and come back. Your rose isn't going to care. It will not care at all. So yeah, this rose is going to end up coming down quite a ways. So this bud is here. I'm going to go there with it. This bud is here. I'm going to go there. This one. This is going to be a very hard pruning for this rose. I'm going to... It just doesn't have things where I want it. Bud right there. And
this is a hybrid tea.
It is a hybrid tea. Yes. It was a hybrid tea, yes. It still will be a hybrid tea. So that's pretty harsh for this rose, but it's going to clean it up. This rose is also, I don't know if you can see it, but it's pushing buds in the center. So this is going to have another stem come out from the center. So back there. So this is another hybrid tea. The damage on this is when they harvest them in the field, they're really rough on them, and they tie them in bundles of 5, and they're just like squished like this. So they do get a fair amount of damage. This one has its bud here, so I'm just going to take that damage off there. I don't like this spot right here, so I'm going to try to get in there as best I can. It's hard to get in sometimes. And just take that out. Otherwise, the other thing that I see on this is that I don't like this stem right next to this one. So I'm going to take that off. Thin it. And then also, in looking better, this rose is really damaged right here. So I'm going to take that out. And it's going to look scary. Sorry, on these, you won't have to take your tag off when you're at home. This one has a bud right here, and the disease damage is here and here, so I can come down and take it out there. It's not ideal because this is here, but the bud is here. So I'm going to get a branch here or here. Actually, there's two. And then this way as well. This big branch right here has a bud there, but I don't want it because it's going to push into the middle of the plant, and I don't want that. But it does have a nice one there. So I'm going to use my loppers. And Art, will you come hold this for me, please? This is my trusty assistant. This is my husband.
I told her to come watch.
No, I cannot do life without. So I'm going to take this right down to here, and I'm pretty stubborn, so I would try to do it with this, but then my hands are going to be tired at the end of the day. So I'm going to come in here and try to come down as close as I can and cut it there. So that one's going that way, and then this one has a nice bud here, and I don't really want it to go that way, so I'm going to take it down to there. So that's pretty good.
So how close to the bud?
It's about an 1/8 to a 1/4 of an inch. It's just a little bit. It's not a lot. I probably could come even a little closer and have it be better, like that.
So an 1/8 to a 1/4.
Yeah, it's really like you just want to make sure you're not going to clip that bud out when you do it. And so then this one has a nice bud there. So I'm going to cut that. This will be the predominant bud that will produce your flowers. And since I have this one, I'm just going to also prune the roses so that when I'm done, I can go cut it. If you ever get bare root roses, you will also get some root damage, and you will want to prune that out because it's not going to be beneficial to the rose. So, but I mean, that's pretty drastic for most people. But this will be, it'll grow and be this tall by June.
Wow. How do you get the dirt in the dirt on the mound of dirt?
I would dig the hole.
Pass it around?
Yeah, go ahead and pass it around. I would dig your hole and then make a cone in the middle, and then just kind of put that down into the cone so that it gets good soil contact, and then backfill it. But watering is also going to help you get the dirt back in there as well.
I have a question of planting. So when you plant this, how far down do you plant?
You want to leave at least 2 to 3 inches of rootstock and bud union up here. So this came out of the field about right here,
Okay.
where it's brown, and you just kind of want to put it back in that same spot. Yeah.
Okay.
So in colder, we can pass this. In colder parts of the country, they actually plant the bud union down into the soil, and then they kind of move the soil away from it when spring happens, so that it doesn't root itself. Because roses root really easily, actually. But they need the bud union to be covered for the cold. It freezes deep in some places of the country. And roses don't grow everywhere. I mean, we are super privileged to have roses here. They're actually really easy. And beautiful. So, yeah. Someone was talking about your shrub roses. This is a miniature rose. It will probably never get those huge canes that rose has. They're going to stay small for the most part, and they're going to be crowded. So their roots won't be as big. So on this plant, I only see a little bit of damage. But there is some dead wood here. So in the interest of air circulation, I'm going to take that out. And this branch here, I'm going to take down to this bud so that it goes away from the plant. And it also just looks weird because it's bigger than the other branches. So in the interest of air circulation, this doesn't actually need a ton of pruning. I'm going to take this center out here. I'm going to head it here and get rid of it. And I'm going to probably get rid of some of the branches that are growing into other branches. So I'll thin that one out. And then this branch here, I'm not too happy about either. It's just going to crowd this one out. So I'm going to prune that. And I'm going to take this one out as well. So that kind of thinned it up a little bit. This is damaged here, so I'm going to take that out. And then I'm just going to look at it and make little cuts. Like I'm going to take this branch out because it's going inward. I'm going to take this out because the tip is not happy. It's kind of dead. I'm going to take this one down because it has a bud here. And I might actually be done with that. So miniatures and shrub roses just don't need the same kind of pruning.
I didn't see when you had that one, how far down from where you saw the base of the root, that you go down 2 to 3 inches.
Oh, okay. We can have that.
Root on that one, you show me the root starts here, and
Well,
then you should put it 2 or 3 inches
right.
down from that.
So this rose is on its own root. So this won't have the same application. You're only probably going to go down about 1 inch on this one to about right here. Because it's on its own root, it's not as important to keep that graft union above the soil line. So the other 25% of the roses that are grown in the United States are own root roses. They're very vigorous. They have really great cold hardiness. They flower well. But sometimes they are super vigorous, and you'll get a lot more growth out of it, depending upon where you are. So you do need to be aware that the rootstock also somewhat limits the height of the plant a little bit too. Kind of controls that a little bit. So I would probably stop on this rose for now and wait and see what it does in the spring for growth. It doesn't look too bad. So mostly what I grabbed was hybrid grandifloras and just that one miniature. So this is an example of a own root rose that's on a vigorous, it's got vigorous stalk. And it's gonna throw some more branches. So I would leave that because I want that to come away from the plant. So I'm gonna leave that, but this plant is very dense and it needs to be thin. So I'm gonna prune this out, which you may not be able to get that close when your plants are in the ground. And I'm gonna prune this one out because it doesn't look as good down here as I want. So, and the branches are crossing.
So you've got two verticals that are very close to each other. Would you take one of those out?
Yeah, I'm getting ready to decide which one. So the interesting thing about that is that I have some options for getting a different, like not taking it out all the way. This has a little bud there. So I could do this, if I can get in there. That's kind of a challenge on roses sometimes. And then that's going to throw the branch that way. It's still probably too congested though. So I really need to go down here and take it out. So that opens that up. This little stub is not useful for anything. It's not going to shoot any leaves. It's not going to shoot flowers. I will just prune that off. Same for here. This is really congested. I'm just going to take that off. So mostly the structure of that is pretty good. I could take it down more, but I think I'm going to leave it. So it's not bad. The beautiful thing about pruning is it's just really, I can pass it around. It's an experiment to some degree. I mean, there are guiding principles, but every year is different because you'll prune just a little bit differently. Roses put out new, vigorous growth every year, and that's where the flowers come on. They want to be pruned every year so that they will flower.
So in order to, you wouldn't generally see that if it was growing.
Right, it'll just come out as another stem. So the way to tell that this is not a sucker is when it sends out its stem, it'll kind of arch up and it'll just grow normally as the rose would grow instead of growing straight up and wild. So that's sort of how you can kind of tell on those. But yeah, you're right, you wouldn't see that when it was planted. So all right.
Just get a quick question.
Yeah.
I have knockout roses that were put in when my house was built. What category of roses did they fit in?
They're kind of a shrub rose, or what they call a landscape rose,
Yeah.
and those don't need to be pruned quite as much
Oh, good.
as hybrid teas or grandifloras or floribundas. They will need to be pruned for air circulation though, and a little bit for height. So
But I don't need to take them down to the ground.
no, you don't need to take them down to the ground unless you're trying to invigorate them. Pruning sometimes has this misconception that it's to control growth and keep a plant in bounds. Pruning actually stimulates a plant to grow. If you're pruning something, you're going to get more growth. And the way to control the height and the growth of a plant is to thin them. So, you know, like this is the heading cut. And I don't know if I want to do it on this rose. Hang on. So So that was the heading cut, and then this is the thinning cut to go all the way back. I controlled the growth of the plant by thinning it that way, but heading it makes it grow more. So I don't know if you've ever seen apple trees that someone's pruned with a chainsaw, but then didn't prune the next year, and there's all these sprouts that are going up. That actually created that growth by pruning it that severely. Had they taken it down and headed it, it would have controlled the growth of the plant down low. The plant would have suppressed itself. So you have to sort of be careful with the kind of cut you do. But roses, again, are very forgiving. So if you're paying attention to your roses and watching how they grow, then you'll just get really good at knowing which cuts to make. So, and you know, sometimes I prune something and then I stop because I'm stuck and I don't know where to go next. So I just wait and I'll come back to it, and then inevitably I'll see it and I'll go, oh, that's what that needs. And then I can make the cuts and move on to the next thing. So
I'm holding this one, and I see that you haven't pruned the dead away. And it's like, am I right? And you haven't pruned close enough to the root ball.
I stopped on that one because I just wasn't sure.
Okay.
So that's, so I stopped because
this is one, okay, this has not really yet been pruned.
Correct, the top has not been pruned, right. Yeah, I sort of stopped because I was going to go crazy on it, and I didn't want to go crazy on it. So, but since I have this one out, we'll finish. So, this one's dead. And in all honesty, if I left it, it would just be dead for the rest of the root plant's life. But I don't like that look. So, I'm going to go in and take it out. This is a problem. So you have to decide what you want to leave. And I'm going to take out the middle one to clear that up a little bit. And I might make a mistake. I might cut it and then decide, oh, I should have cut something else or done it differently. Because, there. And then this is also dead here. So I'm just going to take that away. And then it's actually not bad. So what I'll do is just reduce the size of the plant a little bit.
What kind of rose is that?
This is also a hybrid tea. It's called State of Grace. So that's the interesting thing. When you start to look at roses, their stem coloration can be a little bit different. This is more like a gray-blue stem, I think. Their thorns can be different. Like moss roses have little itty-bitty thorns all the way up them, and almost more like raspberries. There's a rose that has huge thorns on it that they only use in landscapes where the west sun is coming down and the thorns are translucent. They're red, and when the sun's setting, you can see the sunset through this rose. It's stunning, but that's the only reason anybody grows it. It doesn't have any great flowers. It's okay, but it is stunning. So I'm going to lower this rose just a little bit.
How do you decide how low to go when you're doing this process?
So in the landscape, I probably wouldn't go this low, but I am getting ready to pop this rose up here because it's bare root. And I wanted to have as much chance to grow new branches in its pot here as possible. So this is hard pruning. This is really hard. I would probably, in my landscape, have left more. I would have left twice as much as probably on this rose. So, and you do get to know your roses, which ones grow really vigorously and which ones are spindly. So that just comes with time, and that's okay. So there's a question.
Well, you said it was dead, but you're pruning it and going to put it back in the ground after you prune it. If you said this is a dead plant.
Oh, no, the stem, I'm sorry, it was hard to see from back there, but there was a little stub, and I pruned out the dead stub. This is very much a live plant. Yeah. So,
Are you going to talk about climbing roses?
I will. Yeah, I can. So I'm going to pass this around too so you can kind of see it. This is where they seal the rose with wax.
Oh,
It's not a big deal when they're crafting. They seal it with wax. So you don't need to take it off, but it was there, so I did.
Does it hurt a rose to clip off the thorns?
I wouldn't do it while the plant is growing, but definitely prune. You can prune them off when you cut a flower for the vase. Yeah.
they keep grabbing.
Oh yeah, yes. So we were re-educated this week. Apparently, roses don't have thorns; they have prickles.
Oh, really?
I mean, you know, I've always called them thorns, but it's a style. There are 3 different styles of thorny things, and roses have prickles, not thorns. So I don't know if we're going to start a trend by that. This rose is actually not too bad. This is a mini as well, so I'm not going to prune. I'm just going to prune this dead stuff. And I'm going to prune this just because it's so spindly. Spindly growth can just clog a shrub up. So, and then I am going to prune this right here so that it shoots out farther. And same with that. So I think that's all I would do on that rose for now. It was kind of funny when they're pruned, but they're pretty good. Is there any questions about what you saw me do that you might, be confused about, or? Most roses in the ground, if this is the ground, are going to end up being about that tall right now, depending on how vigorous they are. And you can also prune into the season. If you get a rose and you've made a cut in the spring that hasn't worked for you, now you have a branch that's growing over the driveway, in the summer you can take the loppers and whack that off. It's not going to hurt the plant at all. It just keeps it a little in bounds. So, yes.
So do you want to plant them in a mostly sunny position? I have a rose garden, and now my cherry tree has gotten way bigger than I expected, and they're all the roses are just looking terrible now.
Oh.
And they're getting too much shade. Is that what it is?
It could be that there's too much shade. It also could be that there's some competition from the cherry root. Roses are kind of picky about that. They don't like other roots around them. That's why you see roses kind of growing in rose gardens. They don't like a bunch of competition. They're heavy feeders, for one thing, and so and they're also heavy drinkers. So they want to have their roots, to themselves, kind of. There's a few things that you can grow with roses, like thyme. Thyme is a really great cover crop for roses. It grows underneath it. It's drought tolerant, so it's not going to take moisture away from your rose. And then it makes it look pretty. It keeps the weeds down a little bit. So
Then how do you get rid of a rose?
you dig it up. In general, a rose, once you dig the major part of the root out, is not going to come back. So that's about the only way to kill a rose is to dig its root out. So,
Can you transplant roses?
roses are hard to transplant if they're grafted. You definitely run the risk of getting your rootstock. They are just really hard to transplant that way. So,
I have one that's in a pot. It's been in a pot for maybe 4 or 5 years, and it's really looking very unhealthy. Could I put that in the ground?
you can put that in the ground, yes, because it will have a root ball that you can
Yeah.
get in pretty easily. Just put it at the same level as it was in the pot, though. So
Would you trim that root ball?
you could, if it's too big, you could trim it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, if you think about how bonsai plants are treated, you root prune a bonsai to keep it small, and those plants still live. So pruning the roots is not necessarily a bad thing. So, and I took. Oh, well, hopefully we're gonna figure out which rose I took the label of. Okay. Note to self: find. Are there any? So somebody mentioned climbing roses for special pruning kinds of things. Climbing roses have stiff stems, and they're going to come up to whatever you're growing them on. They'll come up stiff. My climbing rose is stalk about that big, and then it's trellis out, and so those horizontal branches are what you want to prune. You don't want to prune that main stalk until it becomes less vigorous, and then you'll want to have a cane that's down low that will take that place. So you kind of always have 1 or 2 canes behind your main cane to be able to train, and you can kind of angle them out so that they're going a different direction. But you want to prune the top of your rose just like you would a hybrid. You go for the, diseased, damaged, dead wood first, and then a little bit of thinning, and leave them.
So don't hard prune a climber.
I would never take a climber down. I mean, my climber is probably 6 feet tall, the main stem, and then the rest of the plant is up top on an arbor that I have. So, could be a problem because now I have to get on a ladder and prune the top part. So, I could have kept it lower and still achieved the same effect. I could have gone 4 feet and achieved that effect too. It just wouldn't have been as tall. Rambling roses, the difference between a climber and a rambler is the stem on a climber is very stiff. It's not going to bend. And a rambler has that arching appearance in it. And ramblers can be thinned. I would thin the center out, and then I would just head the tips, because they're going to bloom on that back wood. I would not prune a rambler down super low unless it's so out of control that you want to re-control it. But ramblers are meant to get big, 12 to 20 feet tall. So if you're going to plant a rambler, you definitely want to have the space for it. Because it's hard to keep a plant, and this is true for all plants, it's hard to keep a plant in bounds if it really wants to be a big plant. If you can, find something smaller. They're making more and more plants smaller for smaller yards. Even trees. They're making more trees to be smaller so that you can enjoy the nice shade but not have to do a ton of pruning on it. And reach the fruit. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Was there any more pruning questions, kind of? Do you feel like I explained the stuff to you well enough that you feel comfortable going home and pruning? Okay.
When can you come to my house?
I have to pot up about 500 roses before I can go anywhere.
I have a number of forward bundas that have been there several years that they just really grow well, but they're pretty. Would you go in the middle and take some of the main stalks clear down to the ground?
I would, yes. I would go into the middle and prune a few out so that you get that airflow. Yeah. Oh, that's a pretty rose. Yeah. I haven't actually met very many roses I didn't like. Very few roses, you touched on it earlier, very few roses like to grow in the shade. They really, really want their 6 hours of sun, and if they have more, that's even better. There's a couple really old climbing roses that will climb up trees sometimes, but they won't flower as much. I mean, you're not going to get those big hybrid tea flowers out of that kind of a rose. You're going to get that cute, delicate, clustered look on a flower in something that will climb a tree. So what happens if they're in the shade? They just produce less flowers. So, and sometimes they're prone to more disease, but not always. I do want to mention a couple things. Roses are heavy feeders. They want food once a month, starting March, the end of March, April. You want to start feeding your roses once a month. There's a couple different products you can use. I like to use an organic fertilizer. I have lots of other things that I'm growing that I don't want to use a chemical on, and so I just try to stay with the organic fertilizer as much as possible. What we sell here also has some beneficial bacteria in it and mycorrhizal fungi, which is super great for the soil. It will look weird sometimes. I know people have seen the mycorrhizal growing in their soil and think that it's a disease because it looks like a whole bunch of little stringy white things. And you think, oh my goodness, something's wrong. So, but actually, that you have some super healthy soil. You have little stringy white things growing in your soil. So, pat yourself on the back. You're doing something right.
Can I ask a question about that? Because I have that rose tone. I just bought a house that's got 10 or 12,000 roses. You have exaggerated.
Yeah.
But do you just sprinkle that stuff around the base of the rose and then water it?
So this you have to take a little rake or trowel, sprinkle it, and then rake it in. It needs a soil contact. There are some pelletized fertilizers that you can just sprinkle around the tree or the trunk of the rose. And then when you water, the fertilizer is time released into the soil. So you could do that as well. This is also another option for people. This is a 3-in-1. It does the fertilizing and it does disease control and insect control. And it's applied, like towards the end of March with a water. You water it in, and this plant takes it up systemically and then fights the diseases and the insects from the inside out. And so this is not my preferred choice, but this works really well for people. Like if you don't want to spend a whole bunch of time looking at things and managing, I would go with this because this is like 3 to 4 months of application. So it's a lot of bang for one-time application. So this can work really well for that.
So with that, then you wouldn't feed once a month.
Correct. Right. It has a time release in it. Yeah. And it has a cute little measuring tape that apparently doesn't want to go back on. If you have, this is called Bio Advanced All-in-One Rose and Flower Care.
It's hard to find good stuff.
Yeah.
For lazy people.
Well, I wouldn't say lazy. I just like to be in my garden like nitpicking. So, in all honesty, your health of your rose is taken care of really well. So, and that's really the point. So, and then if you live in Corvallis or Albany, you have deer. And they are pruning your roses for you, but they're not doing a very good job. Sometimes they're eating the flower buds even. So we have a couple products for that. This is a product that's a 2-in-1. You put it in the soil in step 1, and that starts the action right away. And then step 2 is a systemic that keeps the plant being from the inside out repellent to the deer. So it's a two-step kind of program, and it lasts a long time. So that's,
And what's that called?
this is called Deer a Take. Or attack.
Smell funny or?
It makes it taste bad to them. Yeah, it makes it taste bad. And in all honesty, the little critters that are doing most of your damage are the babies. The babies, the fawns and the yeah, they don't. Nobody read them the list. Other plants are not supposed to eat. So they will try everything. So they're really the ones that do the most damage. And then there's also some products, and these products also work well on planters. My son-in-law lives in deer country, and he used this product on a planter a couple years ago, and the deer have never bothered it. It has egg, cloves, and garlic in it, and they just don't like the smell. This one's called Repelzol. So, and you are welcome to look at these later. Similar thing, except this one has blood meal in it. They hate the smell of blood. So this will repel them as well. This product you'll have to reapply though. If it gets wet, it'll wash away and you'll have to reapply it. The good news is this blood meal is also a fertilizer though, so it's doing, when it gets wet, it's double action. This one's called Deer and Rabbit because some of the things that are eating plants are not just deer. I shouldn't blame it all on them. And in all honesty, I don't know what the active ingredient is in this. Oh, it's the same thing. Egg solids, garlic, and thyme oil. All sort of organic. Not you're not going to damage your people or your plants. One thing I want to mention too is watering. Watering roses should be like a once a week thing. I don't want to degrade anybody's drip irrigation, but having roses drip irrigated every single day doesn't push their roots down. They need to be watered once a week deep, really deep. And if that's just putting your hose on the rose for an hour at a trickle, and then letting the drip irrigation supplement that later. But drip irrigation can almost never give your roses what they want water-wise, unless you have that special emitter that is programmed for that gallon, for the rose. And you can do that. I mean, but that does take a little bit of finagling the system to, so I think that's one of the reasons maybe roses do well on the edge of lawns is because lawns get watered a lot and they just suck that water up. But the other thing is you don't really want to use overhead fertilizer, sprinkler. They hate that. That causes more diseases than anything. So they just want to be watered down low at the soil level, the root level. And you'll prevent a lot of diseases that way, really. So that's also beneficial. The other thing is, if you want, roses are meant to be enjoyed. So if you want to cut them for inside, there's some conditioning things you want to do. And some of you may know this already if you're flower growers and you cut for inside. When you go out to cut a rose, take a little jar of water with you so that when you cut it, you can just put it right in the water because they will want to soak up water right away. Cut it a little bit longer than you're actually going to use it in the vase because you're going to recut it when you go in and put it in the vase. You also want to condition it in a room that's cool and kind of dark. Like I have a back porch on the north side of my house that never gets above 60 degrees and it only has one window, so it's just kind of dark. So cut the flowers in the morning, put them there for a couple hours, and then make your arrangement. The flowers will last a lot longer than if you just cut them and put them right into an arrangement. So that's the ideal. Sometimes you just need them right away. And that's okay too. And then the other thing is just remember that it's okay to practice on your roses and make a mistake. They are super forgiving, and they will give you lots of joy. So I'm happy to take questions